So, everybody, welcome to another edition of the Dissident Film Club. Keaton Weiss here with Russell Dobular.
Hello.
We're here to talk about the new movie Tar, starring Cate Blanchett, written and directed by Todd Field. Just his third directorial effort since 2001, when he debuted with a great drama/thriller called In the Bedroom. Followed that up with another very strong film, Little Children, in 2006. And then I didn't realize, but he took 16 years off and then put this one out on October 7th. As you can see, the poster image says this year. Nominated for a bunch of Oscars, getting high praise, drumming up a little bit of controversy over some of its themes. But I'm going to toss to Russell, who saw this first and thought we should do it.
Well, when I saw this, it really made me think of this controversy that swirled around Martin Scorsese over what he said about Marvel movies, saying that they weren't cinema.
Sorry to cut you off 10 seconds into your monologue. That wasn't controversial to me. I thought he was 100% right the second he said it, and I always thought it was ridiculous that he got any backlash, but predictable given, you know...
Okay, you know what? I wasn't gonna say this, but since you said that, okay, you want to see the shallowness of identity politics. I had somebody who's very committed to that way of looking at the world, who actually brought this up to me, saying, "Well, the Hollywood that Martin Scorsese is thinking of is a Hollywood where people of color weren't welcome in powerful positions." Okay, so that's the problem right there. What the fuck does that have to do with what he's talking about? Hollywood could have been 100% people of color at that time, and the aesthetic observation he's making would be just as relevant. It has absolutely nothing to do with that. But you did get some people who tried reflexively to say that, oh, well, he's looking like what they did to Taibbi in the debate, because he's talking about how the news business was fundamentally better at one time. Right. Well, it was whiter then.
Right.
Like, as if that has anything to do with what Scorsese is talking about. Like, those things can be true at the same time. It can be true that it was a more unequal Hollywood, and it can also be true that it was an aesthetically superior Hollywood. You can argue that these social justice movements started to change, rightly so, the composition of cast and crew and writers and directors. Unfortunately for those people who are getting this opportunity now, they got it during a period that Scorsese rightly identifies as a dark time for cinema. They didn't get it during that golden age of the aesthetics of Hollywood. You could argue those people of color have been cheated because of the things that Scorsese is talking about. They finally are getting ahead, and they're getting ahead in a Hollywood that's become a theme park.
Right. I mean, there still are great filmmakers now. I would argue the two greatest filmmakers of this century, Alejandro Iñárritu and Alfonso Cuarón, they are from Mexico. They're not white. Those two guys are, I think, far and away the best filmmakers working now. And so, yeah, there you go. It's not that they're not out there. It's not that there aren't great filmmakers out there from all around the world. It's that the incentives are such that the only films that make it to a big screen are the films that are worth paying $22 a head to see it on a big screen, which tend to be these big, spectacular superhero movies, or as Scorsese called them, theme park rides, which is basically what they are.
Right. Well, and that's something we don't look at enough. Look, I was a child who went to the movies constantly. I probably went to the movies when I was a child like twice a week. You couldn't afford. I was a poor kid.
Right.
And I could afford it. It was like $1.50 to go.
Yeah. Now forget it.
And it's not relative to inflation. It's not the same.
No.
$1.50 was not what $22 is.
Right.
So yeah, that's a big part of it. I mean, that happened with theater too. I mean, that's a big part of why theater doesn't have a popular audience anymore. It's too expensive. Who can afford that? Right.
All right. So Tar. Right.
Okay. So I thought of Scorsese saying that as soon as I saw it, because Oh, cinema. I remember that. Look at this. A grown-up, complicated screenplay that doesn't tell you what you're supposed to think about what you're watching, that is comfortable with ambiguity, that has not a simple, straight line moral to the story to convey, but has very complex ideas, much more like a novel, as a lot of these films in this classic era of cinema that Scorsese is describing had. Movies like Five Easy Pieces, which end very ambiguously. I don't want to spoil this 50-year-old movie for anybody if you want to see Five Easy Pieces, but has a very ambiguous ending. And that was typical of a lot of movies of that period, where there were these complex character studies about complicated characters. To take that technique and apply it to the current moment, God bless it, because this is a movie about the conversation we're having about the nature of power, about cancel culture, about whether you can separate the artist from the art, about the corrupting nature of power.
And very specifically about MeToo. In a very specific,
in a very real sense. And it's a grown-up movie about it. It's not, this is a movie from 1975 about the current moment, and that's the movie we need about this current moment. We don't need a movie that demonizes that character, and we don't need a movie that justifies that character either. We need a movie like this that presents how complicated these questions and these issues are, and leaves it to an audience of presumed adults to work through it. Some people have thought that the movie was based on a famous composer, Marin Alsop, who actually is the first woman to conduct the Vienna Orchestra. It is not actually based on her, but she took exception to the movie, kind of missing the point, saying it was anti-woman. She said in an interview with the Sunday Times, I was offended. I was offended as a woman. I was offended as a conductor. I was offended as a lesbian. To have an opportunity to portray a woman in that role and to make her an abuser, for me, that was heartbreaking. Now, Blanchett responded that the movie is a meditation on power and power is genderless. Exactly. If this character had been a man, it wouldn't have functioned as a meditation on power. It would have functioned as a meditation on the patriarchy. I believe, I haven't seen any quotes to that effect, I believe that's why he made the character a woman, so that he could really make it a movie about the current moment and not about men or the history of men in this position. We have those movies. We have the Weinstein movies. We have these movies. He wanted to make a movie that was broader in its perspective than that, and he succeeded brilliantly. I texted you when I was watching it. I was blown away. I haven't seen a movie at this level of artistic merit probably in decades. I'm not saying there are none out there. I haven't seen everything, but it's been a very long time since I saw a movie that just had that quality that Scorsese is describing when he's talking about this golden age where the artists were inspired by the arts. They wanted to prove that film belonged in the same category as writing, as sculpture, as the fine arts, right? And they went about it that way. It's not an accident that watching something like Tar, you feel this is more like reading a book in terms of the complexity of its themes and the amount of levels that are there.
Yeah, I mean, he certainly takes a lot of chances with the narrative form. Like, you could really argue the movie is 2 hours and 40 minutes long almost. The inciting incident really doesn't happen until 90 minutes in, when she finds out that she's being looked into, right, for sexual misconduct, right? Or some kind of misconduct. We don't even know exactly what the accusation is when we first find out about it. That doesn't happen for an hour and a half. So there's a lot of exposition, just like there's often a lot of exposition in a novel, right? It really takes a lot of narrative chances. For me, it doesn't work as well as you think it does. Not that it's a bad movie. I thought it was actually quite good. I don't know if I'd put it on the level that you are. I think it was a bit too long. I think it could have lost a half hour of runtime. I think a little too much exposition. At first, I really dug it. I loved how it opens with this very realistic interview. They actually got a real New Yorker magazine guy to interview her, and kind of just plunges you into the actual craft of conducting a symphony orchestra. There were a lot of interesting techniques at work that we'll talk about later. But yeah, I mean, I thought overall, just thematically, the fact that by the end of the movie, she is really neither the protagonist or the antagonist of the story. And the reason for that is because the central question is, how do we evaluate art independent of whatever flaws the actual artist may have carried with them? The movie suggests by the end, what a waste of extraordinary talent, right? By the end, she's doing a gig. Well, I think that's what the point of that last scene is. I don't want to spoil the ending, but by the end, she has taken a big fall. She's working, but she's not working in anywhere near the arena that she should be working in. And I think the film kind of wants us to feel like, man, what a squandering of a gift, that you could be here, but because of your personal life and things like that, you ended up here. Now, the interesting question that poses is it society's fault for punishing her in that way? Like, is society depriving itself of great art and great music by relegating her to this, literally, I mean, comically ridiculous place in the music world? Or is it her fault for putting herself there because she should have been a better person, irrespective of her art? I think the movie asked that question, but either way, it is a tragic arc where she starts and where she falls from. The movie starts literally with the guy from the New Yorker magazine listing off all of these wonderful accomplishments of hers, and then the last frame of the movie, very, very deliberately, is this tragic comic expression of where she ended up.
Right.
And whether it's her fault or whether it's society's fault for sort of putting her through that for whatever crime she may have committed, maybe not legal crimes, but, moral crimes. I think that's the central question of the movie. And it is definitely very, very well done in that way.
Yes, and kind of the vehicle that it uses to come as close as it comes to being explicit, because it is a very subtle film that builds its points in subtext. She has lunches with her mentor, in which they kind of commiserate about this. And at one point, they mention that Schopenhauer threw an old woman down the stairs. And she says, where was Twitter when Schopenhauer threw that old woman down the stairs? He has as this starts to heat up, as the noose starts to close around her neck, she has the final scene with him where he talks about how after the war, when they were going through denazification, so it's a very interesting line. He says, you never knew who they were going to come for. So for years, you kept all your hangers facing in the same direction. And it took me a second. Oh, so you can grab your clothes quickly, right? That was very interesting that people in this position of power would see it this way, that these things are closing in on them. It's interesting to compare it to Nazis, because it's not so facile as that the film is presenting them as Nazis. It's that the film is dwelling on the idea that what was acceptable one year, the next year you might have to flee now. I think that's really what it was getting at. And that is, as you say, like the film, I don't feel like it took a stand by the end on whether this was a tremendous waste of talent. I would say that it said this was a talented person whose talent was being wasted, but it doesn't take a moral position, really. It leaves it to you as the audience to acknowledge, yes, that is a terrible waste of talent. Now it's up to you. Do you think that was justified? Because
well, that's what I meant. Yeah.
It never takes a position on whether she's guilty of what she's accused of, but it strongly suggests she probably is, and that even if she isn't, her conduct around it was monstrous. What she did to this particular person was monstrous because we see her do it. And we see her throughout the film demonstrating an insensitivity to the people around her in other contexts, being extremely manipulative, being extremely careless with other people's feelings.
Right. Now, especially her partner's feelings.
Her partner, her assistant,
yeah,
who wants to be a conductor, and I won't spoil it, but you know, the way she treats the people in the orchestra. But now at the same time, if you're in an art like that, like theater, there's a parallel. You have a director and you have actors and you have crew, and that you have the same kind of absolute power that a conductor has. I mean, this is a cliche in both realms of the kind of abusive, narcissistic director. And if you look at that through one lens, it's genius. And if you look at it through another lens, it's abuse.
Right.
Can you execute at the level that this character executes at without being something of a myopic narcissist? Can you, if you are that sensitive to the feelings of the people in the room, can you drive them to the level to achieve greatness? That question is out there too.
Yeah, but there's another complexity in the movie around that component, which is that she obviously has a thing for this newbie in the orchestra.
Right.
And so she doesn't give the solo of the piece to the first chair, who's obviously, by virtue of the fact that she's first chair, most deserving of that solo. Instead, she decides to hold an audition because she wants to give the solo to the girl she likes. And so in that sense, she goes as far as to perhaps compromise the integrity of the work. By having an open audition for a solo that clearly should go to the first chair. So she's not simply this mad genius who will do anything for the work. She is even complicated in that realm.
True.
She's willing to compromise, you know, that genius of hers when she feels like there's something else in it for her outside of the work itself.
And related to that, the film on several occasions goes out of its way to show her not embracing the mantle of being a trailblazing female conductor, but quite forcefully rejecting that interpretation of herself. Right in the first interview, she says, I don't want to be made a gender spectacle of, and really asserts that this isn't an issue for women anymore, that there are women in the past who were trailblazers, but today it's normalized, which apparently not, because the conductor who didn't like this film was the first female conductor of the Vienna Orchestra. So it's not as, and then there's a nice, I mean, this is what I mean by this being cinema. You know, you really don't see this level of thoughtfulness in filmmaking very often anymore. They do screened off auditions so that the audition will be race and gender neutral. But there's a little bit of daylight where she can see the person who had just performed exiting from an audition, and she sees it's a woman by the shoes and erases their name. Like the movie goes out of its way to show her like not really interested in supporting women. And then this was a really nice moment. So there's a scene with her and her protege, her new protege, where she's from Russia and she's talking about a hero in Russia, a female hero, and she's talking about how they celebrate every year. And Tar assumes that she's talking about the character's birthday, but it's actually International Women's Day. So why is that scene there? That scene is there to show you that she doesn't know when International Women's Day is. And that in a way ties to something else that was really nice. This was very subtle. This is in the film's kind of climactic third act. She goes home, and they don't say exactly where this is, but it's in New York. And being a New Yorker, this is Queens or Staten Island. And it shows she comes from this very kind of blue collar background because her brother comes home while she's there. And her name's not Lydia, it's Linda. And the way the brother deals with her, you can see she was the kind of person who realized where she came from, didn't want any part of it, and got out of there as soon as she could, and probably has had very little contact with her family. And her brother's attitude towards her reflects that. He hardly looks at her. Well, you must be hiding out, or you wouldn't be here. Hey, it's none of my business. Got nothing to do with me. Right. And that's it. Yeah. And that's it. And that's the difference between a great film and most of what we see. That's all he did with it. That's all he did. He didn't have to do more. He said it all with that one scene with her brother, 5 lines. Exactly. Yeah, no, that was very well done. All right, so let's play a little bit of sound, shall we? There's the famous scene in this movie is when she is teaching at Juilliard, and this kind of nervous kid is conducting, and she stops him, and she starts talking to him, and his legs start shaking. You could tell he's not confident in his talent or his skill. And so he kind of falls back on the sort of woke defense. Well, I'm just not really into, conducting the work of cisgendered men, And you kind of sense that he's a little full of crap, because he's just so obviously not confident in his work. You kind of get the sense that he's using it to sort of make an excuse for why he kind of sucks. And she rips into him for it.
You play really well. But nowadays, white male cis composers, just not my thing.
Don't be so eager to be offended. The narcissism of small differences leads to the most boring conformity.
I guess Edgar Varese is okay. I mean, like, anyway.
Oh, well, then you must be aware that Varese once famously stated that jazz was a Negro product exploited by the Jews. Didn't stop Jerry Goldsmith from ripping him off for his Planet of the Apes score. It's kind of a perfect insult, don't you think? But you see, the problem with enrolling yourself as an ultrasonic epistemic dissident is that if Boggs' talent can be reduced to his gender, birth country, religion, sexuality, and so on, then so can yours.
All right, so that was one part of it. That's about a 7-minute scene. So go ahead.
Now, of course, everybody who has been itching to attack cancel culture seized right on that scene. The right wing was all over that scene. That scene, yes, does offer a great critique of cancellation and cancel culture and the whole idea of evaluating art on the basis of the identity of the people who made the art. It is an unambiguous critique of that. But within the context of the movie, that's counterbalanced by the question of her moral culpability for her actions in other contexts. So yes, it is unambiguously, the film, I would argue unambiguously in this scene is rejecting the whole premise of dismissing Bach on the basis of his identity markers. Right. Sure. But it also has other things to say about cancel culture. It does not say, well, Schopenhauer, he shouldn't have been held to account. Really, the question is, should he have been able to get away with throwing an old lady down the stairs? Should people have been worshiping him for centuries after he did something like that? Should she get to hold her position, even though, again, it doesn't really tell you for sure that she had a sexual relationship with somebody. It leans on that side, but it never definitively tells you. You never have a flashback of anything happening between them, so you never really know. But it does show you how she completely destroyed this woman's career how she made sure she couldn't get any kind of work. It does show that she was a horrible person who abused her power. And these are very complicated questions, and the movie gives these questions a suitably complicated answer and doesn't tell you one way or the other what you're supposed to think about this. It's not a polemic. It's a true work of art. It's a complex character study that leaves you with a lot of questions to answer for yourself. How much do we want to hold artists accountable for their personal lives? I mean, the convention until 10 minutes ago was not at all. Woody Allen ran off with his own very inappropriately aged adopted daughter and didn't miss a beat in his career. That is how much license artists had until very, very recently.
Right.
And the film does pose that question. Like, should it doesn't, the right wing wanted to grab that scene and claim this movie for its own. This movie doesn't belong to the right wing any more than it belongs to the left wing. It's better than that. It's art. It's art. It doesn't take a side. It poses questions. And that scene that we played, we didn't play that part, but right before, she's trying to persuade him out of this way of thinking, and she's playing Bach. And she says, "You hear Bach? Bach knows that it's the question that's of interest, not the answer. You hear how the music is questioning and never answering." The film is commenting on its own treatment of this character and these themes in those lines.
Yeah, that's all well said. Before we wrap, I think I'm going to blow your mind when I tell you this. I'm going to make you like the movie even more, okay? That scene, the iconic Juilliard scene, is about a 7-minute scene of her teaching the class and talking to that kid, you know, about his, you know, wokeness and rejection of Bach. That 7-minute scene is shot, I don't know if you noticed this, in one continuous take. It was one take.
Is it? There are no cuts?
Yes, there were no cuts. The camera does not cut. Now, the brilliance of that, because that stood out to me, because I'm like, wow, they shot that all in one take. That's pretty good. But I'm thinking, why? Why did they shoot that all in one take? And then towards the end of the movie, we realize that a student was filming her, and a student deceptively edited the footage to make it sound like she was saying things we didn't say. So that choice to shoot it in one take was this brilliant setup of then seeing that footage manipulated later. And we know it was manipulated because we saw it in one take with no cuts. That's brilliant filmmaking, is using the camera to make a point like that, to set up and then pay off. That I was like, wow. Because I was thinking to myself, why are there no cuts in this scene? I mean, it's cool. I love a long take. I that's like my jam. I love when filmmakers can do that.
You ever see The Rope?
But I'm like, why? Yeah, well, of course. Yeah, Rope is just 7 takes, right? Yeah. Yeah. But I was thinking, why? Like, that was impressive, but why was that choice made? And then to pay it off by seeing manipulated footage of that edited together, I was like, wow, that was good. You got me there. That was cool. So yeah, Tar, very, very good. Russell says it's the best film he's seen in 20 years. I wouldn't rank it quite that high, but pretty high. Would definitely recommend it.
In terms of, I would say it's a great antidote to what's out there right now. Just to mention on a dark side, because this does raise questions. Well, can you still make grown-up movies? Because this is the kind of movie when you went to the movies in the 70s, even into the 80s, at least half the movies were serious movies for grown-ups. Not this. This is a great film in any era, in my opinion. They weren't all that great. A lot of them were ponderous and boring, and that's why classics are classics, right? But they were trying to achieve something like this, right? A lot of movies that you would see at the cinema. And Scorsese's right. They have basically disappeared in favor of movies that they're trying to sell to China. And if you want something at this level of artistry, you got to look at some kind of show like Breaking Bad, where they're going to tell this story in 5 seasons. Right. You know, if you brought it to streaming, you could make this a 5-season show, right? Instead of making it a 3-hour movie. But cinema like this is rare. But is it viable? I mean, the box office isn't good. Tar is one of only 7 films ever to win all of the major critics awards for Best Picture. And yet it's only grossed $10 million on a $35 million budget. And they say the budget, double it on the marketing. So you're really talking about they probably lost about $60 million so far on this. I would sadly say it brings me no joy to make this observation. As I watched it, it definitely occurred to me, okay, man, we just don't have a society that has the attention span for cinema anymore for this kind of a movie. Like, you got to pay attention. It's a lot going on here. It takes up a lot more bandwidth than, a Marvel movie about, oh, we got to get the thing to prevent the thing from doing the thing. There's a lot more going on than that. And Scorsese actually wrote an op-ed for the New York Times arguing that he felt it's not that people don't want this. It's that if you don't give it to them, you condition their tastes in a certain direction. I would love to agree with that, but I don't think you can overestimate how much the technology has literally done to people's abilities to concentrate. That smartphones and the internet, it's not the same human population you had in 1975 when movies like this were the norm.
Yep. No, absolutely. But it is available on streaming, so you can check it out. Russell, perhaps slightly more enthusiastically than I do, but we both recommend it very much. Check it out. Tar. That's nominated for a bunch of Oscars, so if you want to make educated picks in your Oscar pool this year, if any of you guys do that, although I suspect our audience doesn't, check it out. Worth seeing. It's a blast from the past. It's an good old-fashioned adult drama, which we don't see much anymore. So thumbs up from both of us. Thanks for watching. We'll see you Sunday night, live, talking politics, returning to the world of politics. Thank you very much.
Good night and good luck.